All right, so we're recording. So again, my name is Karen Mavison, and like I said, Julie is unable to attend tonight. And so she asked me to start the meeting and to run the meeting. So I'm going to just start with a couple announcements, and then we'll take it from there. So a couple things. Some of you probably got an email today telling you these things, but to start with, we have something coming up on starting June 10th, and that is a Sparta Nation Team Builder Training. And so any coach in the Sparta Nation who is Emerald or lower is welcome to join. And so we would love to have you, if you are Emerald or below, join us, or any of your coaches or new coaches that you sign up between now and June 10th to join us. And in the email, there's a link to get people to join, and then also that'll be in the Sparta Nation page as well. And then the second thing is that on the 17th of June, we have a Vision Party Revisited. So we will be, if you guys can make sure you mute, I can't figure out how to mute, so mute yourself when you come in, please. So when the other thing that we have is the Vision Party kind of revisited, and so that is going to be on the 17th. And there is a place where you can go and actually say, yes, you're going to attend. And it's free, and it's at Julie's, and it's from 6 to 8. And so she's going to be providing drinks, and appetizers are she's asking people to bring appetizers. So again, that more information will be in the Sparta Nation page on that underneath the event tab. And then also, as a reminder, during Summit, we have our team party. And that is on the evening of July 9th. And that also is at Julie's house. And so she has information about that in the Sparta Nation page, and she will continue to share information on that. Just put it on your calendar. And then the last thing is that the Morning Meltdown 100 is kicking off in July. And so as coaches, we're going to have exclusive access to the different packages starting July 1st through the 15th. And then our customers have access starting on the 16th. And then on the 29th, the workouts actually go live. So you want to keep that in mind and start building the momentum towards that program as it launches in July. And I know some of the things that many of us have talked about that I'm doing as well is I'm talking kind of breadcrumbing how important it is to start your day off right, because this program, certainly you can do the workouts other times of the day, but the intention of the program is to get up in the morning, do it in the morning, have it done. And we know that people who are successful, that they leave clues, and one of the clues that they leave is that they work out early in the morning or do some type of movement early in the morning. That's a good way to start the day. So I am anyway, I know other people are starting to talk about this as they move into this, to start talking to people about how important it is to start your morning off right. So those are some of the announcements to start with. And then if everyone wants to put everything in speaker view, and I have a couple people I need to mute, and then we're going to get started. So let me just introduce myself a little bit first to start with. I am, again, my name is Karen Mavison. It's spelled way different than it sounds. You've maybe seen me on Sparta Nation, but it's spelled, you can't see it because it looks like I'm Julie Boris right now. It's spelled Meuwisen. And I'm married. I have 3 children. My oldest is 27. She's actually a Beachbody coach, and she has launched. She doesn't live at home anymore. She lives 3.5 hours away. She teaches first grade. And then I have 2 teenage boys at home, a 15 and a 17-year-old. I also teach full-time at our local technical and community college. I actually teach marketing, sales, and management. So tonight I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topic matters that I teach in my selling classes. So you're going to get a little bit of a taste of some of the things that I am teaching my selling classes. And some of you hopefully saw it in the event portion of Sparta Nation or in the feed that there was a personality assessment that I asked you to take ahead of time. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about, because I think it's easier that way. Okay, so can somebody just give me like a thumbs up or something that you can see my screen? Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about tonight is social styles. And social styles is there's really not a right or wrong social style. Sometimes we use the words communication styles or personality styles, and probably many of you have taken some type of personality assessment before. There's a Myers-Briggs, and there's the colors, and there's all kinds of different things that people can take for styles of personalities, and this is a little bit unique. We call it social styles. I kind of use communication styles interchangeably because based on our style, we'll indicate or we'll have a preference on how we prefer to be communicated with. All right, so there's really 4 distinctive styles. So some of you who took the assessment maybe saw that you had a primary style, and then you had a percentage of other styles, of the 3 other styles. And so there's usually a primary and a secondary style that you are most comfortable with. And again, there's not a right or wrong style. It's just a preference. And it's important that we understand ourselves before we can understand anyone else. That's why I think taking an assessment ahead of time is helpful, because then we can say, oh, that is how I am, and oh, that's why I am like I am, or this is why I need this kind of information, or how I talk to people, or why sometimes people push back, because this is how I am. And so as a salesperson, and even though I know we kind of, some of us anyway, hate to say that we're salespeople, we all are salespeople. It doesn't matter whether or not we're technically a salesperson or not. We are selling every single day. We're selling our spouses. We're selling things to our kids. We're selling things to our coworkers. We're telling people things like, you're selling your ideas all the time. And as a Beachbody coach, we are sharing our stories and we're sharing something that we're really excited about, but in the end, we are making a sale. And so as somebody who's working with other people, we need to learn flexibility, because like there's a way that I prefer to communicate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's how my customer prefers to be communicated with. This whole social style idea was actually introduced by Marilyn Reed, and it has been backed by many different studies that it's actually significant and valid. Okay, so again, there are tendencies, and the more experienced we are with working with people, the more we tend to be more flexible, and the more that we can adjust how we communicate with people, because we're aware of that. But one of the things I want you to be really careful about is not to pigeonhole somebody and say, oh, well, they're this or they're that, because when you pigeonhole people, you sometimes just shut down. So instead, consider it as just information or knowledge. So every style has its strengths, and every style also has its weaknesses. So if you take your style to an extreme, there are weaknesses. All right. So again, it's important to understand your own style first, so then you can learn how to adapt to your customer's behavior. Okay, so let's talk about the styles, because I think that's really important. So you can see on here that there is there's a continuum on 2 different continuums. There's task-directed and people-directed. So what we mean by this is that somebody who's more task-directed, they're really geared or oriented towards getting something done. They really like to get things off their list. They like to get things done. They're very driven by their to-do list, for example. Somebody who's people-directed, more concerned about people and how people are feeling. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody who's task-directed doesn't care about other people. I'm not saying that at all. It's just that especially when they're under stress, they're really thinking more about getting something done versus trying to get everybody on board. Then the horizontal continuum, we have ask-directed. So somebody who is more ask-directed, they want something to be done, particularly somebody who's in a leadership role, they're more likely to ask somebody to do it. Somebody who's tell-directed is going to just tell someone how to do it. So one of the things that I like to share with my students that I tell them is it kind of sounds like this. But you know what, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me just go to the next slide. Okay, so we have an analytical, and some of you may be analytical. So an analytical person is very task-oriented. So they like, again, to get things done, but they're more likely to ask for someone to do something.
You're going to put that in your room? Or you want to show Daddy?
You guys make sure you're muted, please. And then somebody who is a driver is very task-directed. So again, they're very oriented towards getting something done, making a decision, and they're more likely to tell people what they want to have done versus ask. Somebody who's expressive is very people-directed. They're very oriented towards people. They love to have people around them. They love to get other people involved in a process or something. And then again, but they pretty much, you know what they're thinking, and they tell you what they're thinking. And then somebody who's amiable, again, very ask. They'll ask. They rarely tell you what they're thinking or tell you directly. They will eventually, but they're a little slower to do that, and very concerned about people and getting people involved. And how they get people involved is different than an expressive, but they're still very people-oriented and very conscious about what's going on with people. Okay, so here's the example that I use with my students. So let's say it's time to have coffee at work. So somebody who is a driver is going to say something like this. Okay, everybody, it's time to have coffee. Let's go. Right, that's what a driver is going to say. An expressive is going to say, hey, everybody, guess what? It's coffee time. We all need to go. Come on. All right, amiable is going to say something along this line. All right, guys, it's about coffee time. Are you ready to go? And somebody who's analytical is going to say something along the lines like, all right, if everyone's done with their work, are you ready to go to coffee? Okay, so very distinct little different things on how they talk, but very important because they communicate differently. Okay, so let's talk about them a little bit more. And those of you who are drivers, as we go through the 4, maybe you can say to yourself, yeah, that sounds like me, or no, that doesn't sound like me, or part of it sounds like me, but just think about it, does it sound familiar? Okay, so somebody who's a driver moves quickly. They like to make decisions very quickly as well. So they like to have information so that they can make decisions quickly. They like to proactively solve problems. They tend to be a little bit competitive. And when they want information, they ask very direct questions. They do not beat around the bush. You pretty much know where they're at, right? They would prefer to discuss rather than write. So, that's kind of their preference in communication. They tend to have very direct eye contact. As a matter of fact, some drivers can be intimidating because of that. Sometimes it can also be viewed as arrogant because of that, because they're very driven and oftentimes opinionated if we take it to the extreme. And they like to talk and they interrupt because things aren't happening as fast as they want to have them happen. In their office, if you're ever in their office or in their personal space, they might display symbols of power. And then they also tend to use more closed non-verbal cues. And so I don't know, I can't see myself, so I don't know if you guys can see me. But so like closed verbal cues has to do with your body language. So if you're meeting with them in person, they might have their arms crossed. They aren't very expressive with their hands necessarily. And they tend to like active, competitive leisure activities. I am a driver. So when I communicate with people, I tend to get right to the point. And as a matter of fact, many times people will say, wait a second, like I'll call somebody and they'll say, wait, time out. And they'll say, aren't you going to ask me how I am? It's like, oh yeah, how are you doing? Right? Because I want to get to business. That's just how I am. I'm pretty much to the point. I had one boss one time tell me that I needed to write more flowery because I was writing too direct, which made no sense to me because why wouldn't you want it to be direct? Because I don't want anyone to be confused about what I'm trying to say. And so I know that when I am under stress, I become what's considered a driver. So I go to the extreme, right? So I have to be very aware of that I get really down to business and I can sometimes be almost like a tank because I so want to just get things done. And so I have to be very conscious of that. Right? I'm actually in my office because I have really bad internet at home. So this is my college office. And I don't know if you can see behind me or not. But there, I just moved my camera a little bit. I guess somebody might say I have symbols of power on display because I have all my awards displayed up on my wall. So I guess that is very typical of somebody who's a driver. So those of you who are drivers, maybe you would agree that this might be how you operate. So I was trying to think when I was putting this together, I thought, now who in Beachbody would you all know that's a driver? And Shalene Johnson, I think, is a driver, and Julie Boris is a driver. So there's 2 people that you know, okay? All right, so if we talk about social media is very different because we aren't always talking to people face to face. We can't see their faces. We can't hear their tone of voice. And so how do we pick up if somebody is a driver on social media? Because it's hard, right? Because most of us probably use Messenger or we message people on Instagram, and that's just words. When we communicate with people, 55% of our message comes through body language, 38% comes through our tone of voice, and only 7% comes through our words. So when we are communicating by messenger or any type of message, we're only communicating 7% of our message. And the same is true of the people we're talking to. So only 7% of their message is coming to us. So it's much harder to pick up on personality styles on social media. But here is some of the things that you might look for. So again, they're going to be very much to the point. They're going to be the ones who like right away are like right to the point of things. They're going to have little chit chat at all. They're not going to they're going to get frustrated if you spend a lot of time asking them a bunch of forming questions, because it's like, really seriously, just get to business. What are we going to talk about? I want to get a workout and I want to or learn about nutrition. Just tell me what to do. If you look on their social media page, you're probably going to see that they are involved in very active activities as well. Okay, the second one is analytical. And if you remember analytical, they're task and ask oriented. So they're really, again, oriented towards tasks, but they're more likely to ask questions versus tell. Analytical people rarely volunteer their feelings. They tend to keep their personal life very much to themselves. They do ask very specific questions and they like facts. So they're going to be people who ask you a lot of facts about Shakeology, a lot of facts about the workouts, a lot of facts about the performance line. They also prefer writing versus talking. So they're very comfortable when it comes to using Messenger or any type of messaging or texting type of thing. They use very formal names. They're not very comfortable with nicknames. Generally, they wear fairly conservative clothing as well. They smile infrequently, and they are also very punctual, and it really irritates them when people are not punctual. They also are diplomatic, and they tend to like to do more solitary activities, so you might notice that on their social media. And the thing about analyticals is they tend to keep their personal life separate from business. So before I became a teacher, I worked as a marketing manager for Case IH, which is a big tractor company. And I worked with a lot of engineers. And so I'm a marketing person. And I'm a driver, of course, but I have lots of personal stuff in my office, and I have all kinds of things in my office. I talk about my family all the time, and I'm working with these engineers, and the majority of them are analytical. And there are some that I worked with for 7 years, and I never knew if they were married or had any kids, because that was separate from them. Analytical will tend to talk a little bit more in monotone as well. And so, and I was thinking about who in Beachbody might be analytical. And the person I come up with is Darren O'Lean. Now, I don't know him personally, so I don't know for sure. I think I've shook his hand once, so I don't know for sure, but I've heard him speak many times. And it's not because the type of work that he does, even though certainly that kind of ties into it, but when you hear him speak, he's still really passionate about Shakeology. He's super passionate about it, but he's not a big storyteller. He's pretty low key. He kind of talks a little bit in a monotone. He really kind of falls into this category. Okay, now how do you know if somebody is analytical on social media? Again, they're going to ask for a lot of data. They're going to be pretty slow to make decisions, and they're going to share very little about themselves. And you're probably not going to see a lot of personal things on their page or on their Instagram or whatever either. And then when they do write to you, they're going to be very formal. So they're not going to use a lot of shortcuts. It's going to be very formal, probably grammatically correct as well. Okay, the third one is amiable, and amiable, if you can remember, is down in the lower left-hand quadrant, and amiable is ask and people-directed. They are really concerned about people, and so they are very patient. Like an amiable is somebody who doesn't have any problems waiting in lines. Matter of fact, they have no issue with that at all, as long as they feel like they're moving forward. They tend to make intermittent eye contact. They like smaller groups, so they have very close-knit friends. They are maybe a little bit uncomfortable in large groups because they prefer smaller groups. They do like explanations, and one of the things that they're concerned about is anything that feels really risky. And so they tend to avoid risk, and they tend to avoid conflict, and they feel really uncomfortable when somebody is angry. And so they will oftentimes not call any attention to themselves, so they kind of like to blend into the background more or less. So they wear very subdued colors. They ask a lot of questions, and they rarely state their opinion. They will, but it's not something it's not like a driver or an expressive, which we'll talk about next, who you pretty much know what their opinion is. They just tell you. They prefer to communicate in writing, and mostly because it gives them an opportunity to think about it before they actually communicate it. And their leisure time activities really involve a lot of people, particularly family. So on social media, you're going to pick up maybe that they don't want to fail. And maybe they've tried other things before. They've tried other diets, or they've tried other workout programs, or they've joined a gym or whatever, and it's failed. And they're a little afraid to try something new because they don't want to fail again. They're relatively slow to make decisions because, again, they're very risk adverse. some people who are amiable are super risk adverse. They ask questions of you, and many of the questions that they're going to ask you are probably going to be more personally oriented, and they're really going to not want to tell you no. Okay, so they're going to be the person who kind of just either ghosts you, or they're going to kind of string you along a little bit because they don't want to say no. And so I know when I work with somebody who's an amiable, I need to kind of give them a safe way to get out without having them feeling like they're hurting my feelings, because they don't want to hurt my feelings, because they're very concerned about how people feel. My brother is an amiable, and when he talks about the people that he works with, he talks a lot about how his staff feels, how his team feels, how if they're, like one time he was implementing a new software and he was talking about not about how great this software was going to be and how it was going to improve their workflow. He was talking about how it was going to impact their staff, and he was concerned about how it was going to impact them. So again, very amiable. I don't know for sure who's a Beachbody person who's amiable. I think the first person who comes to mind is Megan Davies. She just kind of feels that way to me when I see her in the videos, but I don't know for sure because, again, I haven't met her. But she's kind of low-keyed, kind of subdued, just kind of seems more that might be her mode of operation. Okay, and then the last one is expressive. And expressives like to socialize and to talk. So expressives are people who love to be around other people. So if you remember in the quadrants, they're tell and people-oriented. They just love people. They love to be the center of attention. They are super enthusiastic, and they're really animated. So I have a really good friend who is an expressive. So she's an extreme expressive. And when she would talk to me, she would do things like this. Karen, you can't believe what happened today. And it was like this all the time, and she was just, I mean, I loved her to death, and she could get like crazy amount of work done, but she was like super expressive, wore crazy bright clothes. She had nicknames for everything. And what was really scary for me as a driver is pretty soon she would say something like, will you get that who's it over there? And I know what she was talking about, which is like, oh, this is kind of creepy for me. But anyway, she was very expressive. They smile a lot. Open body language. They love to touch people. They love to hug. They tend to speak relatively loud. Routine is not something that's their friend. They tend to be late for meetings. They get easily distracted. They use a lot of informal names, have a lot of nicknames. My dad was an expressive, and he had a nickname for everybody, and not only us kids, but also all of his, when he retired, he was a school bus driver, and I'm pretty sure he had nicknames for almost every kid that rode his bus as well. People who are expressive are very action-oriented, but very people-centered. So they love to do people-centered activities for leisure. So they're not going to necessarily be, they might be a runner, but they're probably going to find other people to run with them. They're probably not going to do it alone. So how do we know if somebody's an expressive on social media? They're going to be people who call people girlfriend. They're going to have lots of exclamation points or question marks or type of, they're going to use emojis, a lot of emojis. They maybe overshare. So you end up learning a lot more about them than maybe you bargain for. And you're going to see a lot of group photos in their feed as well. I think when we think about expressives with Beachbody, okay. I'm going to step back. So I don't know how many of you are working with Josh Coates or have listened to any of his calls. He calls himself a peacock, and a peacock is an expressive. Okay, and he's totally an expressive. I think other expressives that we might see, I think that Sean T is probably an expressive. I don't know for sure. Again, I've only had a picture taken with him a couple times. I sat down and had a conversation. If Julie was here, she might be able to tell us if she thinks that he is for sure. But just based on some of what I've seen, that's where I would put him. Okay, so what does this all mean? What it means is that we have our own styles. So whether you're a driver or an expressive or an amiable, we like to be communicated a particular way. So for example, as a driver, I like to just get right down to business. Give me my options and let me make my decisions. Somebody who's an analytical wants to get a bunch of data. And as a driver, if I think everybody wants to be communicated with like how I like to be communicated with, I'm going to shut down an amiable. I'm going to alienate an analytical because I'm not going to be giving them the information that they need. So what we need to do is we need to be able to pick up on clues to understand how they prefer to be communicated with and then adjust our styles accordingly. Okay, so how do we know? All right, so we kind of talked about how we know. Now here's some strategies. Now what I have for each one, I have if you're face-to-face a strategy and then a couple of social media tips because I know most of us work with potential customers on social media. So if you're working with somebody face-to-face that's a driver and you're not a driver, right? Because if I'm a driver working with a driver, we're like totally on the same vibes, right? But if I'm not a driver, if I'm an amiable, drivers are pretty intimidating because we're kitty corner on the quadrants, right? They can be really intimidating. So as a driver, I know I need to back off. But if I'm an amiable, I need to step it up. So I need to return eye contact. I need to smile. I need to minimize small talk because they don't want small talk. They just want to get down to business. They are busy and they want to get stuff done. They can be a little bit intimidating, like I said, and pushy. So make sure you stand your ground, stay professional, listen as much as you can, and then rate their or match their rate of speech. So as you can hear me today, I talk pretty fast, and a lot of drivers tend to talk pretty fast. So match that rate of speech, and then also support your opinions and ideas as much as you can. Social media tips, if you're working with somebody who you've identified as a driver, you want to give them specific, brief, direct information. So you want to be really direct. Using a form for them to fill out would probably be helpful because you can get a lot of information using a form without having to drag out, 20 different back and forth conversations to learn information about them. So like I use a form for potential customers, and it asks them a bunch of information, a bunch of questions, and it's kind of fun for them to fill out. And then I learn a lot about them in a very short period of time. So then when I make a recommendation for a workout or which nutrition plan they should follow, or if it should be Shakeology or the performance line, I don't have to go through 20 questions. I can just get this information. So a driver in particular is going to like this form because it's going to feel much more efficient to them. They make decisions very quickly. And so you want to close the sale sooner probably than you would with other people. Now, I'm not talking about closing the sale today. That would be a whole nother conversation on how to close the sale. But one of the things that I would do for sure with a driver, I actually would do with everybody, I do it with everybody, is I do something that's called a trial close. And a trial close is super simple. It's just, what do you think? Or could you see how that works for you in your life? Or do you think that would be a good breakfast for you? I mean, it's just, you're just checking with them to see where they are, and that's actually a trial close. And so certainly with a driver, I would close sooner than I might with somebody who's amiable or analytical. Okay. Now in analytical, if you're, again, face-to-face, use restrained body language. So like if you're an expressive, you do not want to give them a hug because that's totally outside of their comfort zone. So you want to avoid touching. They might have a slower rate of speech, not necessarily, but again, mirror their rate of speech. Be a little more subdued. Remember, analyticals and expressives are kitty corner like this. And so if you're an expressive, you can really intimidate an analytical. An analytical really frustrates an expressive. All right, so we can kind of butt heads. So again, you want to make sure that you make that adjustment if you are not analytical. Provide them with a lot of data. That's what they want. They want data. Now, not overkill of data, but they're going to ask for data. So that's something that you're going to want to share. I worked with a salesperson back when I was in industry before I was a teacher, and he was super analytical, and we would go meet with a customer, and the very first thing he'd do, he's whip out data. We worked for a seed company, so he would bring a bunch of data out on what the yields looked like the year before, and I could see farmers' eyes just gloss over like, I don't care. So you have to be really conscious of that if somebody's not analytical, but if someone's analytical, data is going to be important for them. So then you send them the videos, and then you send them they might want to see the ingredient labels for Shakeology, for example, or any kind of research that we might have. They like being responded to in writing, and they like to be very focused on business and much more formal. Okay, so how do we handle them on social media? Again, give very specific, brief, direct information. Oh, that was a mistake on my part. Okay, so I didn't fix that. So anyway, forget what I have up there, and I'll just tell you. So here, what you need to do is give them data, like I was saying. They would probably like a form because it would feel less invasive for them because they could take their time filling it out, and they probably would overthink most of the answers, but at least they would have time to fill it out. And you still need to help them when it comes to making a buying decision because analyticals have a hard time making buying decisions. So I would probably do an options close for them, which means that I would give them this or this. Would you like this or would you like this? What do you think about this or that? That's probably would be how I'd help them through the decision-making process. Okay, something crazy. I just see all my social media tips are not what they're supposed to be. Okay, so I will fix that because I'm going to give you guys this. I'm going to load it up into the into Sparta Nation, but I'll fix my social media tips. I'll just have to talk about it rather than have you look at that. Okay, so on the amiable, again, you want to avoid, if you're face-to-face, avoid aggressive gestures. Make eye contact with them, but again, mirror their style. You want to be much more relaxed in your delivery. Ask a lot of open-ended questions to try to get to what they're thinking about or what they're feeling. But you need to use a very structured approach so that it feels structured to them. And then try to solve their problems or deal with any of their objections that they might have without making them feel challenged. A good way to do that for anybody, but particularly for amiables, is using feel, felt, found. And that just helps them feel a little bit more comfortable, because you're empathizing with them, that you understand how they feel. You have felt that way before, or your customers have felt that way, but here's what they found is one way to help with them, and that works well with amiables. When it comes to social media, you want to make sure that you, again, ask a lot of open-ended questions. Do not push them very hard. You still need to, probably options closes would still be helpful. You still want to help them through the decision-making process because they're kind of slow to make decisions. But if you can, you don't want them to feel like they're being challenged or pushed because they will shut down. And so this is a really good example. An amiable is somebody who you want to talk about that there's really no risk, that we have a 30-day money-back guarantee. That one would really come home with them, and also that you would be with them every step of the way. Also, being part of a community is big for somebody who's amiable, that they're going to be supported by other people. Okay, and expressive. Again, if face-to-face, you want to be really enthusiastic. So if you are not expressive, expressives can really be like feel a little over the top to you. And not that you have to fake being expressive if you're not expressive, because that doesn't feel right. But you want to be enthusiastic, be comfortable with them touching you. If you don't like somebody touching you, if they want to give you a hug, let them give you a hug. Use open body language again, so you're not closed like this. You're more open. You're using your hands when you're talking. Use a very user-friendly way of writing or talking. You need to ask open-ended specific questions and try to guide them, because expressives will tend to kind of take rabbit trails and be talking about all kinds of other things. And they're going to probably talk relatively fast, be very excitable. So show interest in what they're saying. They're going to be telling you stories. Pull them back as much gently as you can back to the topic. Now on social media, you want to really talk about how they're going to be innovative, how they're going to be seen as a leader, how other people might follow them, particularly if they're thinking about being a coach. And you also really want to talk about the community, because that's really important to an expressive being part of something that's bigger than them. Okay, so when we think about communicating with the different styles, really the driver wants a bottom line. Okay, so that's really important to them. Somebody who's analytical wants options, they want testing, they want data. Somebody who is amiable likes to hear about testimonials, and they like to have good instruction. So if I'm working with an amiable, even after they bought, I'm going to make sure that they have good instructions on how to use Beachbody on Demand, and give them links to recipes and meal plans, and because that's going to be important to them. And as I'm talking to them about my product, as I'm trying to sell them on whether it's a workout program or a nutrition plan, I might use testimonials as well, because that resonates with them. And like I said, with the expressives, talk a lot about the community and the sense of community that we have being part of Beachbody. So you want to think about the image that you project based on your style and where you're most comfortable, because like I said, I'm a driver, so I can be really off-putting to somebody who's amiable or analytical, and I can be really frustrating to an expressive because I just want to get down to business. So you want to think about what kind of image you have so that you make adjustments based on what their preference is. Okay, it's not their job to adjust to you, it's your job to adjust to them. Okay, so I just have a little bit more I want to talk about, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions that you might have. So people buy for their reasons, not for our reasons. So we think we have this fabulous product. We want everyone to do it. We know it's life-changing. We know it's changed our life. We've seen it change other people's lives. We love it, and that's why we're coaches, and that's why we're sharing it as passionately as we are. And we can't understand why everybody doesn't want it, right? And so but they don't buy because we love it. They buy because they have decided to love it. And so people love to buy, but they hate being sold. All right, so think about it. You too, right? So you love to buy, but you hate being sold to. So when you find something as a consumer that you feel is the right fit for you, you're excited about it. But if you feel like somebody has manipulated you into buying something, doesn't feel so good. So as a person who's working with customers or potential customers, we need to understand what their motives are and what's important to them. And there's really two types of motives. The first type of motive is task motive. So we like to liken that to a bike. So the back wheel of a bike is the task motive, and that's kind of the business reasons why we buy. It's things like, or the rational reasons why we buy. It's like the cost is right, the price is right. It's going to improve our quality of life. There's no risk because it's 30-day money back guarantee. Those are the motives that are more rationally oriented, that things are, okay, we can rationalize why we're going to buy something. The other types of motives are personal motives. And personal motives are the emotional side of buying. In business selling or business buying, business buyers will tend to buy more for task reasons or business reasons why they're buying. In personal purchases, we tend, even though we might rationalize it and say it makes sense financially to do it, we really are buying because of emotional reasons or personal motives. And we have 4 primary personal motives: power, approval, recognition, and respect. And the thing that's kind of cool is that they all tie back to a particular style. Okay, so somebody who's a driver is motivated by power. Somebody who's an amiable is motivated by approval. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second. Somebody who's expressive is motivated by recognition, and somebody who's an analytical is motivated by respect. Okay, so really when we talk about personal motives, it's our personal preferences that spur us to buy. And it's really psychological. And again, it involves relationships with other people. And it's, again, the biggest reason people buy. People buy for personal reasons with personal purchases way more, and emotionally way more than they do anything that's rational, even though all of us are really good at rationalizing things. All right, so like I was saying, a driver is motivated by power, an expressive is motivated by recognition, an amiable is motivated by approval, and an analytical is motivated by respect. Okay, so let's talk about this just really quickly. So if somebody who is motivated by respect, like an analytical, they like to be able to demonstrate and prove their expertise, that they are interested in research that supports the product, that they have made a really good buying decision. They want to feel really good about the buying decision because it was a smart buying decision. So when we talk to somebody who's an analytical, we want to talk about that this is a smart buying decision, that it's going to make good, even though we know it's emotional, it's still good financial sense, that it's going to be good for them and good for their body and good for their family, that is, people are going to see it as a good decision, that they made a smart decision. So in social media, use words like, when you're talking to them, like it's a systematic plan. Okay, so this is going to resonate with them. This is a systematic plan. It's backed by research. We have a scientific approach that we use. There is exclusive information that you gain by being part of Beachbody On Demand, or whether it's our VIP access or whatever, there's exclusive information, and that they can do it themselves. They don't have to go to the gym. They don't have to be tied to a class schedule, that they can kind of do it themselves. So those are some words to use as you're starting to talk to them about their different choices. Okay, and amiable, like I said, is motivated by approval. So they are really concerned about how their decisions affect other people, and it may be their family or it may be their friends. So they're responsive to products or services that reduce conflict or minimize risk. And we know that our products have minimal risk because we have a 30-day money-back guarantee. We know that there has been a lot of success. Success after success after success. It has changed so many people's lives, and we know that, but we need to be able to demonstrate that as we talk to them as well. So an example might be if somebody's concerned about how long it's going to take for their staff to learn about the new software, or it might be for them when it comes to Beachbody, it might be how long it's going to take for it to for other people in their family to get on board. Those are things that might be important to them. So with them, use words like this is our most popular program, or our most popular flavor, or our most popular option. Talk about the support that you will give, the support that they get from different groups that we have on Facebook, for example, like we have our super trainer groups, or the support that they may have from Beachbody itself, or from our blog, any of those types of things where they can find information. Again, always get back to the money back guarantee with them because that minimizes their risk. Let them know that you're reliable. They're probably going to be the type of person who really watches you to make sure that you're consistent. So right now I have a potential customer that I'm talking with, and we've had conversations back and forth, and I'm pretty sure she's an amiable. And I noticed that she's paying more attention to my social media because she's liking my posts much more than she ever has before. So we're just about ready to do a share cart, and then she's kind of stopped talking to me. This morning she was talking to me, and I haven't heard back from her since then. But anyway, she has liked several of my posts, not only today's post, but a couple days back. So she's checking me out, right? She's going to make sure that I'm really who I say I am. And you also want to talk about how others will love it as well, because that's important to them, that other people are going to like it or that their families are going to get on board. A driver is motivated by power. And power isn't like they don't want to have power over other people. They like to have power over situations. So they like to gain control over something that's a real practical aspect of their situation. And so you want to point out how the product can give them the ability to make quicker decisions, or how easy it might be, or how they can have different options they can choose from, and that they're going to get desired results in a quicker way, or that there's different options that they can use that help them get their results faster. All right, and so when I'm talking to somebody who's a driver, again, I'm going to talk about desired results. I'm going to talk about how clear the choices are, that it's easy to implement, and it's not going to take a bunch of time, or it's going to be a reasonable amount of time, that it gives them freedom. Right, and we know that with a lot of our program, there's a lot of freedom. I'm not tied to a gym schedule. I can go down in my basement and work out whenever I want to. I can choose foods from a huge list. I don't have to have particular foods. And like with the Ultimate Portion Fix, I can pick the foundation, or I can pick the time nutrition, or I can, if I wanted to, I can do carb depleting. I have lots of different choices. And even with To Be Mindset, there's a lot of choices there. So that gives people a lot of freedom, which really resonates with the driver. They're going to have access to important information, important people, which is important. So kind of getting to, those super trainer groups, or even you as a coach is important. And you want to talk about immediate action. Like if you sign up today, you're going to have access right away to the workout programs. It's going to take a week or so, at least it takes a week where I live, to get your Shakeology, but you're going to have access to everything else right away. And again, that's important to a driver. And then lastly, an expressive is motivated by recognition. They love to be recognized. So we talk about one of our 4 vital behaviors is recognition. This really resonates with an expressive, right? They love it if you call them out because they like to be recognized, right? So they are going to look for products and services that give them a lot of visibility, opportunities for leadership. They like to be seen as unique or innovative. And so they're more willing to take a risk because they like that whole idea of being a risk taker or a leader. So words to use in social media, talk about them being first, particularly when we're launching a new product like the Morning Meltdown 100, be one of the first would be an example. You can talk about how they could set an example for themselves or their family or their friends or their community. Maybe they could teach others. So talk about how they could teach others, or you could teach your family. That's going to resonate with them. Other people are going to notice quickly that you're making a difference. You're going to feel a difference, and people will notice that. Make it unique. They're offering unique, make them feel unique as well. Okay, so the key point is when we talk to our customers, we want to talk to them in their language, not how we like to be talked to, because it helps us connect quicker with them. People expect their task motives to be met. They expect our programs to work if they follow them. They don't necessarily always they don't always think that we're going to be able to talk to them in terms of what's important to them emotionally. Now, I'm not going to say you're going to say to them, well, your personal motive is that you're motivated by respect. You don't say that to them. You just talk to them that way. And then it really feels like you have made a connection, because you have. And that connection is important, because we know if we make a connection with our customers, they're going to stay with us, right? And then they're going to stay connected to the community. And then hopefully, maybe they'll also become a coach or an active coach in time. All right, so with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. So I'm going to stop the share so I can see you guys and see if you have any questions. So does anybody have any questions? Like way too much information, maybe? I don't know. All right. Well, hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully you were able to learn something. And if you have any questions, please ask. And I will I'll put this PowerPoint, I'll fix the little bit that was kind of goofy. I'll fix that and I'll put the PowerPoint with this recording out on Sparta Nation as well. Oh, somebody just asked, do you ever have your customers take this quiz? I do not. Okay, now, because I'm not quite sure how I would set it up with them. You know, I don't know how I would tell them, oh, by the way, will you take this quiz so I know how to talk to you? I don't know. I've never done that with them. Maybe, there might be a way in my form. So I have this form that I use. This is something to think about. There might be some questions, a few questions that I would ask, but you know, that quiz that you guys took, if you took it, was pretty long. And so that, I think I'd lose somebody if I had them do that. For me, as a salesperson and somebody who's been trained in selling, and then I also teach selling, I have gotten pretty good at picking up pretty quickly what people are when I'm talking to them face to face. It's harder for me to figure it out on social media. It really is, because it's just words. And so I can pick it up pretty quickly on how to communicate with them, and I can adjust how I talk about something based on that, but I've never had a customer do that. Liz says maybe have new coaches complete it. That one actually would not be a bad idea, because then you, as their sponsor coach or their upline coach, that might help you understand how to communicate with them and make that connection with them. That actually isn't a bad idea. And then on top of that, it would help them understand who they are, right, and how they prefer to be communicated with, and it might open some eyes for them on how they need to think about their potential customers as well. I think sometimes people think that everybody is the same as they are, and so why don't they talk like I do, or why are they being like they are? And it's not because they're being difficult, it's just because they prefer something different. And so I think the more we understand about ourselves, the more we can understand about other people, and then the better we can connect with people as well. Right? Anything else, guys? All right, well, thank you very much. You guys have a good night and a good week. It's a start of a new month, so let's go after June, huh? And I'm like I said, I'm in Minnesota, so I'm excited to see all you guys that are in Indiana next month. All right, bye.